Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, for years, when people talk about Bitcoin, you always hear this phrase, apex asset.
Right. The ultimate store of value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And usually the focus is, well, it's on the hard cap, the 21 million coins. Scarcity.
Making it this unconfiscatable asset, mainly for the wealthy, right? A hedge against, government debt, inflation, all that.
The narrative is it's for people chasing total financial sovereignty, taking control.
That's definitely the established theory. It's driven a lot of the valuation, how traditional finance sees it. It's framed as protecting existing wealth.
Often for people who already have plenty of options, stable banks, insurance.
Yeah, they're looking for an escape hatch, maybe?
Yeah.
A kind of premium insurance against the legacy system, which they might see as, I don't know, flawed or politically shaky.
Okay, but we're going to flip that right on its head today.
Yeah.
Because the central idea we've pulled from, well, a whole stack of sources, is that Bitcoin's real apex status. It's not about the rich. It's defined by how vital it is for the people who need it most. We're talking about the world's poorest, the, 3 billion unbanked people out there.
It's a really crucial distinction, isn't it, between the theory sovereignty, decentralization as an ideal, and the practical reality of survival and just basic access.
The wealthy investor might be thinking about philosophical decentralization.
But the person whose local currency is collapsing, they're thinking about whether the $5 they saved yesterday can still buy food today. It's necessity.
You can't exactly buy a tiny sliver of a gold bar to protect $5.
Or open a Swiss bank account without a passport and proof of address, which millions just don't have.
So for this group, getting access to a stable global asset isn't some optional strategy. It's fundamental.
Yeah.
For basic financial dignity, for surviving hyperinflation.
Exactly. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack this real divergence, why some are calling Bitcoin the $1 savior. We'll look at the failures in traditional finance that kind of created this need.
The escape hatch idea.
Right. And also the compromises, the tech, the human trade-offs involved in making this kind of survival finance actually work on the ground. I'm Satoshi.
And I'm Satoshi. All right, let's get into that. Section 1, let's try and formalize this idea we're calling the apex divide. Sovereignty versus access. Because these users, their reasons for being interested in Bitcoin are just worlds apart.
It is fascinating, though, how the same network, the same asset, serves these two completely different groups. It's like a two-tiered asset class almost.
With almost no overlap in why they're using it.
None at all, philosophically.
Okay, so tier 1, the sovereignty thesis. This is your typical wealthy investor profile.
Their motivation is largely defensive, right? They're
Yeah.
looking at big picture stuff, macro instability, governments printing money, maybe huge national debts.
Quantitative easing worries, currency dilution.
Yeah, all that. And their big desire, be your own bank, self-custody, take assets completely off the grid outside government reach.
They want those private keys because they fear seizure or censorship or just, unexpected political moves against their wealth.
But here's the kicker, the real irony our sources point out. For them, this whole sovereignty thing, it's a choice. It's an optimization.
They already live in places with stable laws, courts.
Exactly. They probably have FDIC insurance or similar deposit guarantees. They can spread money across multiple banks, even multiple countries legally. They might have complex trusts set up.
So Bitcoin isn't their only safety net. It's like the ultimate add-on. The final layer of protection.
Right, they're optimizing against maybe low probability, high impact risks, tail risks.
Okay, now contrast that sharply with the other side. The access and utility thesis, the excluded saver.
And here, Bitcoin shifts completely. It's not about optimizing wealth. It's about pure grinding necessity.
We're talking people in regions where the local currency is, fundamentally broken. It's not stable.
Think places in South America or parts of Africa, or those examples you often hear like Lebanon, Nigeria, Argentina, where the official money is just collapsing in value, sometimes day by day.
It's existential for them.
Totally. They're not sitting around debating the finer points of proof of work versus proof of stake.
No.
Their question is incredibly basic. I scraped together the equivalent of $7 today. Will it buy the same amount of food tomorrow? Or next week?
When your currency loses 50% or more of its value in a year, sometimes much faster, Bitcoin isn't an investment strategy.
It's a lifeboat. The only way to maybe hold on to some value.
And that necessity, that focus on tiny amounts, brings us straight to this feature.
Yeah.
Granularity. Why that makes Bitcoin uniquely viable for this group.
Yeah, this is critical. Think about traditional safe assets. Gold, for instance.
Right.
Buying gold involves transaction costs, you need secure storage, and there's a minimum amount you realistically have to buy. It's just out of reach if you're earning, say, $10 a day.
You need a chunk of capital just to get in the game.
Even opening a basic bank account often requires a minimum deposit that might be more than someone's weekly disposable income. Or they just can't meet the ID requirement, as we'll discuss.
But Bitcoin, it smashes that barrier. We need to talk about the Satoshi.
The Satoshi, or SAT, it's the smallest unit. 100 millionth of a single Bitcoin.
So, incredibly tiny fractions.
Which means the granularity is, well, essentially absolute. You can break Bitcoin down to represent a value far less than 1 US penny.
And that's the key. Someone can save $1 or 50 cents, even 20 cents worth.
And store that tiny amount in an asset that's global, liquid, and importantly, not tied to the whims of their local government's printing press.
That ability to save in tiny increments, maybe just $1 or $2 at a time, that's the real democratization here, isn't it?
Absolutely. The rich investor might move $100,000 into Bitcoin as a macro hedge.
While the street vendor in, say, Lagos or Buenos Aires is putting $5 of their daily earnings into sats.
To hedge against the immediate, terrifying risk of their local currency becoming worthless overnight, it removes that huge economic barrier to entry.
Traditional finance basically says you need X amount of money just to sit at the table.
Bitcoin, through the Satoshi, says every dollar, every cent, even every fraction of a cent you manage to save, deserves protection on the world's most secure network. It offers dignity, access to stability for billions who were just completely locked out before.
That difference is stark. So if we accept that Bitcoin provides this necessary access for so many, the next question has to be, what failed them? Why did they need this alternative so badly?
Right. What are the failures in the existing centralized systems?
Which brings us to Section 2, looking at those systemic failures. Why traditional finance doesn't work for billions.
We need to pinpoint the things that actively block the world's poorest from even basic financial services. The infrastructure that kind of forces them into unreliable local cash, or worse, predatory lenders.
And probably the biggest, most immediate wall they hit is KYC, right? Know your customer regulations.
Our sources call it the Iron Gate, and that feels pretty accurate.
It locks out the vulnerable.
Yeah. Look, KYC rules come from legitimate global efforts trying to stop money laundering, terrorism financing, all that. But on the ground, in developing countries or unstable places, they've created an operational nightmare.
It's not just needing one ID card, is it?
No. It's often much more complex. They need verifiable documents, things like a recent utility bill in your name, proof of a stable address, official government ID that global banks can actually check and authenticate digitally.
And for millions, maybe billions, those documents just don't exist, or they're impossible to get without paying huge bribes or navigating some Kafkaesque bureaucracy.
Think about undocumented workers, or refugees who fled a war zone and maybe left everything behind, or people living in places where the government itself is corrupt or barely functioning. If the state can't provide reliable ID, how can you possibly meet global banking standards?
And the address thing, too. What if you live communally or move frequently for work? Needing a stable, verifiable address instantly excludes so many people.
So the regulation, which is meant to catch criminals, ends up being this massive barrier, effectively denying financial access to the people who are already the least secure.
If you can't meet KYC, you're basically stuck. Stuck with cash, stuck with whatever collapsing local currency is around, or maybe relying on informal, unregulated, sometimes dangerous money lenders or networks.
You can't open a simple savings account. You can't easily receive money from relatives abroad through formal channels.
Okay, so that's saving. What about receiving money, remittances? This seems like another huge failure point, the fees involved.
Oh, absolutely. Our sources frame this as a kind of regressive tax on the poor. And it really is.
Astronomical fees sometimes.
It's this toxic mix, isn't it? You got maybe a
Yeah.
few big companies dominating the routes, plus the high costs of meeting all those regulations we just talked about, plus the cost of running physical cash pickup locations everywhere.
So when someone working abroad, often for very low wages, tries to send, say, $200 home to their family, they turn to the established players, Western Union, MoneyGram, those types.
And what do those services charge? It varies a lot depending on the countries involved, the amount.
But we're not talking small percentages.
No, The sources consistently point to fees ranging anywhere from, say, 10% to 15% as being quite common. And sometimes, tragically, it can spike up to 20% or even more of the actual money being sent.
20%. Think about that. On a $150 remittance, that's $30 just gone, vanished.
And that $30 could be medicine for a child, school fees, food for several days. It's a direct hit to their survival budget every single time they receive money.
It's a penalty just for being poor and needing to move money across borders, which is fundamental to how global labor works for millions.
Precisely. And Bitcoin, especially using the internet, and as we'll get to, the Lightning Network, just completely sidesteps that whole expensive, physical, often monopolistic infrastructure. The cost drops dramatically.
Okay, so KYC blocks access, remittances are extortionate. What's the third big failure?
The big one, maybe the most destructive, government centralization itself. Specifically central banks, debt mismanagement, and the hyperinflation that often follows.
We see this cycle again and again, don't we? Government runs up huge debts, maybe faces political chaos.
And the central bank ends up being forced, or choosing, to just print money to cover the bills, creating new currency out of thin air, not backed by anything real.
Which instantly devalues every single unit of that currency already out there.
We've seen the horror stories. Venezuela, Zimbabwe historically, more recently Lebanon, Argentina, Turkey. Citizens literally watching their life savings evaporate in front of them.
But why does this hit the poorest the hardest?
It goes back to that apex divide. The wealthy, the financially savvy, they've already diversified. They hold dollars, euros, maybe real estate, stocks, gold, offshore accounts. Their wealth is spread out, more resilient.
They might take a hit, but it's not existential.
Exactly. But the excluded saver, the person locked out by KYC, who doesn't have enough capital for gold or property, their entire savings might be in the local currency, literally cash under the mattress or in a basic local bank account if they're lucky.
They have no way to de-risk.
None. So when the government prints money and inflation explodes, the value of their cash, everything they've worked for, can be wiped out in months, weeks, even days in extreme cases. It's like an invisible theft machine.
Sucking purchasing power away from the most vulnerable to prop up the state's finances.
In that brutal context, Bitcoin stops being some speculative tech thing. It becomes the essential escape hatch.
The only way out.
It's accessible, it's global, it's not controlled by their local government, and crucially, thanks to the Satoshi, they can access it in tiny amounts. It lets ordinary people try to preserve some value against government-made disaster. It's a pure necessity.
Okay, so the need is clear. Bitcoin offers an escape. But then we hit the practicalities. Using Bitcoin itself, the main blockchain, for small, everyday payments. That's historically been a problem, hasn't it? Speed and cost.
That's the classic scalability challenge. The main Bitcoin network is built for maximum security and decentralization. That's its strength, but the trade-off is slower transaction times.
Sometimes 10 minutes, 30 minutes, even longer if the network's busy.
Right. And fees. During peak times, sending Bitcoin on the main chain could cost several dollars, which is fine if you're moving thousands, but totally unworkable if you're trying to buy a coffee for $2.
The vendor can't wait 30 minutes for confirmation, and they certainly can't afford a $5 fee on a $2 sale.
Exactly. So this is where we absolutely have to talk about the technology that makes Bitcoin truly practical for daily use, especially for the poor, the Lightning Network.
Let's get into how this actually works, maybe beyond the simple analogies.
Okay, the common analogy is, main Bitcoin is the super secure bank vault, Lightning is the super fast, almost free ATM attached to it. But how does it achieve that speed and low cost?
It uses payment channels, right? It's like a layer built on top of Bitcoin.
That's the core idea. It's a layer 2 solution. A payment channel is basically a special kind of arrangement, a smart contract, between two users. They lock up some Bitcoin on the main blockchain to open the channel.
Okay, so Bitcoin is committed on layer 1.
Right. But once that channel is open, those two users can send Bitcoin back and forth between themselves instantly and for virtually zero fees. They can do this thousands of times if they want.
Because these transactions aren't hitting the main blockchain every time.
Exactly. They're just updating a private balance sheet between the two of them, off-chain. It's only when they decide to close the channel that the final net result, who overall, is settled back onto the main secure Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay. So the ultimate security comes from Bitcoin layer 1, but the speed and low cost for frequent, small payments come from keeping them off-chain within these channels.
That's the magic. This is what enables those $1, $5, $10 transactions. Globally, instantly, for fractions of a penny. It blows every traditional remittance service out of the water on cost and speed.
But there's always a but, isn't there? It sounds complex to manage yourself.
And it is. For the Lightning Network to work efficiently across many users who aren't directly connected, you need two things: liquidity and routing.
Liquidity means having enough Bitcoin locked up in the right channels so payments can actually flow.
Yes. You need funds available in the channels to send and receive. And routing means your payment needs to find a path, maybe hopping through several intermediate people's channels, to get to the final recipient.
Okay, I can see how that gets complicated fast.
Managing your own Lightning node, making sure you have the right channel connections, enough inbound liquidity so people can pay you, enough outbound to pay others. Handling channels, opening and closing, dealing with routing issues if a path fails, setting up security like watchtowers to prevent cheating.
That sounds like a full-time job for a tech expert.
It is, or at least it requires a significant level of technical skill and time commitment. And that's just completely unrealistic for someone who's focused on daily survival, maybe doesn't have reliable internet, or isn't tech savvy.
So this complexity, the difficulty of running your own Lightning setup properly, that leads us right to the next big point. This really fascinating trade-off people are making.
The custody trade-off. This is absolutely central to understanding how Bitcoin is actually being adopted by millions in the global south.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
It really is. To get the simplicity, the speed, the low cost, and crucially, the recoverability they need, the vast majority of these excluded savers, they're choosing custodial Lightning solutions, absent services where they don't hold their own keys.
They're willingly giving up that core principle of be your own bank, the very thing the sovereignty thesis investor demands.
Completely. Because their priorities, their risk calculations are totally different.
The wealthy investor fears the government seizing their assets or maybe a big exchange collapsing.
But the person living on a few dollars a day, their immediate, much more likely fear is losing their cheap Android phone or forgetting a complex password or seed phrase.
And if they're holding their own keys, losing that phone or that phrase means their money is gone forever. No recovery possible.
Right. Managing a 12 or 24-word seed phrase securely, backing it up properly, being able to retrieve it under pressure. That requires a level of technical understanding, secure storage, maybe even just a stable place to live that many simply don't have.
So the custodial provider, the app, the company running the Lightning wallet becomes their safety net, their help desk.
Exactly. They offer password resets, account recovery if you lose your phone, customer support. They abstract away the scary, permanent risk of user error.
It's convenience over code, as one source put it.
It is. For someone just trying to get by, that convenience, that reliability, knowing they can probably get their money back if they lose their phone, that's non-negotiable.
The philosophical purity of self-custody is a luxury they literally cannot afford to prioritize.
The perceived risk from using a third-party app feels lower than the very real immediate risk of messing up self-custody and losing everything.
And this completely reframes what financial security means. For someone who never had FDIC insurance, never had stable banking, a working, recoverable app that lets them receive remittances instantly without losing 20%. That is security.
That's the apex asset for them. The one that actually works in their messy, real-world circumstances. It adapts to human needs and human fallibility.
So they make the trade. They give up the ideal of controlling their own keys for the practical necessity in a system that's usable and recoverable.
It's a survival decision, grounded in immediate practical needs, not abstract ideology.
Okay, so we've established this custody trade-off is happening, and it's arguably necessary for widespread adoption among the unbanked, given the current tech complexity.
Right, it solves the usability problem.
But we have to be clear-eyed about what it brings back into the picture. Giving up your keys reintroduces centralization. And with centralization comes risk.
The apex paradox, indeed. By using custodial services to make Lightning usable, you bring back counterparty risk. That's the fundamental risk of relying on any third party, the very thing Bitcoin was partly designed to eliminate.
You're trusting someone else with your money. You're betting on their competence, their honesty, their solvency.
And our sources highlight two main flavors of this counterparty risk that users of custodial solutions now face. And they look awfully similar to the failures in traditional finance we already discussed.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is corporate risk. Think Enron, or more recently FTX. This is the risk that the company running the custodial service goes bust. Insolvency.
Or maybe just gross mismanagement or even outright fraud internally.
Exactly. If that company fails, what happens to the user's funds? Well, because the company legally held the keys, the users are typically just unsecured creditors in a bankruptcy.
Meaning they're at the back of the line to get anything back if there's anything left at all.
Often, recovery is zero, or pennies on the dollar. So you escape your collapsing local bank, only to potentially lose everything if the Silicon Valley tech company running your wallet app fails.
Okay, that's corporate failure. What's the second major risk?
Government risk. The risk of state interference. We saw potential examples of this with things like the state-sponsored Chivo wallet in El Salvador.
So when the custodian is the government itself or a company forced to comply with government demands?
Then the state potentially gains the power to monitor transactions, censor payments, or even freeze accounts.
Suddenly that censorship resistance, a core feature of Bitcoin, is gone. If the government can tell the custodian, freeze that person's funds or report everyone who donated to this cause.
Then you've just swapped the old central bank boss for a potentially much more efficient digital one. Surveillance and control become easy.
This creates a massive dilemma then. People need the convenience and recovery that custodians offer, but those custodians reintroduce the risks of corporate failure and government control.
How do you square that circle? How do you keep the usability but somehow use the tech itself to get rid of that dangerous single point of failure, the single company or government entity holding the keys?
And this is where things get really innovative. Our sources point towards a potential solution, a different kind of structure. Federated Shamian mints, or Fedimint for short.
Fedimint is a fascinating concept designed specifically to try and solve this exact problem, to get the convenience without the centralized counterparty risk.
So how does it work? What makes it different from just another custodial company?
The key is to stop thinking big corporation or government agency. The analogy that's often used is much more local. Think community credit union or a local cooperative.
Okay, local, community-based. How does that translate technically? Who holds the Bitcoin?
And the funds likely Bitcoin made usable on Lightning aren't held by a single CEO or entity. They're held collectively by a small group of trusted individuals from within that community. They're often called guardians.
Trusted local figures.
Yeah.
And how do they hold the funds?
Using a multi-signature wallet, or
Yeah.
multi-sig.
Let's break that down. What does multi-signature mean?
It means that to move any funds or approve any major action requires multiple keys held by different guardians to sign off. So, for example, the community might elect 7 guardians,
Right.
and they might set the rule as, say, 5 of 7. This means at least 5 out of those 7 guardians must independently agree and provide their cryptographic signature before any funds can be moved or accessed improperly.
So no single guardian can run off with the money or be easily coerced. It distributes the control.
Exactly. It replaces the single point of failure with a quorum of locally known, trusted people. Collusion becomes much harder, and attempts at theft or censorship become much more visible to the community that selected them.
The community itself provides the oversight and accountability, using local trust instead of relying on distant regulators.
Right, but that's only half the magic. The really clever part, the bit that tackles the surveillance and censorship risk, is the technology Fedimint uses under the hood, blinded eCash.
Based on old ideas from cryptographer David Chaum.
That's the one. It's a privacy technique.
Okay, this sounds technically deep. How does blinded eCash protect user privacy from the guardians themselves?
It uses a cryptographic blinding process. When you deposit Bitcoin into the Fedimint, you get back digital tokens, the eCash, representing your value. But before the guardians sign your token to validate it, you cryptographically blind it.
Like putting it in a special envelope they can't see inside?
It's a decent analogy. They sign the outside of the envelope, confirming the value, but they don't know the unique serial number inside, which only you know.
So they validate the amount, but not who it belongs to.
Precisely. The blinding factor is known only to you. Later, when you spend that eCash token or withdraw Bitcoin, the guardians can check that the signature is valid, proving it's legitimate eCash from their mint and that the value is correct. But crucially, they cannot link that specific transaction back to you as the original depositor or know who you're paying.
Wow. Okay, so the guardians can see the total amount of Bitcoin held by the Community Federation.
Which they need to do for auditing and preventing theft of the whole pool.
But they cannot see individual balances or track who is sending money to whom within the system.
Correct. It ensures privacy and censorship resistance within the community mint.
That sounds like the bridge we were looking for.
It seems to be. The community guardians provide the necessary help desk function. They can likely help a user recover access if they lose their device based on community consensus. But the blinding cryptography prevents the guardians themselves, or an external entity leaning on them, from surveilling or censoring individual users.
Decentralized technology combined with localized human trust and accountability. That really does feel like a potential realization of the APEX asset for this user base.
It acknowledges that people need help, they need recovery options. But instead of centralizing that power in a potentially risky corporation or a government, it distributes it to a local, accountable group, and then uses clever crypto to limit even their power. It's adapting the tech to fit human reality.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive has really taken that term apex asset and shown it has this powerful dual meaning, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just the ultimate defensive asset for the already wealthy investor seeking sovereignty.
Though it is that too.
Yes, it serves that purpose. But maybe its more profound role, its truly apex function, is as this critical tool for basic financial inclusion, for dignity, for survival, for the billions locked out of the traditional system.
The synthesis is that Bitcoin manages to be both things simultaneously. The ultimate hedge for the person protecting millions, and the essential lifeline for the person protecting $5.
And the technological key unlocking that lifeline function, making those tiny savings and payments practical, is the Lightning Network. Its speed, its incredibly low cost, that's the engine driving utility for the excluded saver.
But we also have to keep highlighting that human element, the reality of the custody trade-off. For Lightning to be usable today for millions, they are making a rational choice.
They're choosing usability, simplicity, recoverability over the abstract ideal of self-custody, even with the counterparty risks that introduces.
And the exciting part is seeing solutions like Fedimint emerging, trying to resolve that tension, trying to give people the convenience they need, but within a structure that uses distributed trust and cryptography to fight back against the centralization risks.
It's tech evolving to meet people where they are, rather than demanding people become cryptography experts just to save a few dollars safely.
So connecting this back to the bigger picture, it really makes you think, doesn't it? When we, especially in the West, talk about digital currencies, Bitcoin adoption.
The conversation always seems to start with, how does this affect Wall Street? What are the regulators going to do? How does it fit into our existing system?
We're focused on optimizing a system that, let's be honest, for all its flaws, works reasonably well for most people here. It's maybe 95% functional by global standards.
Right. But maybe the conversation shouldn't start there. Maybe the real measure of this technology's value, its true importance, isn't how it tweaks Western finance.
It's about what it offers to the 3 billion people who don't have access, who live under hyperinflation, who currently face what's effectively a 10%, 15%, even 20% tax, just to receive money from family working abroad because the existing system is predatory.
That feels like a much more profound question to ask. What basic financial dignity and stability can this technology provide to those completely excluded by the current system? How well does Bitcoin, especially with layers like Lightning and structures like Fedimint, serve as an escape hatch from those systemic failures?
That might be the true test of the apex asset.
We hope this deep dive gave you, the listener, maybe a different lens through which to view Bitcoin, beyond the price speculation and the headlines about institutional adoption.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into what the apex asset really means and for whom.